Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second CETL Lunch and Learn for fall of 2023. We appreciate you joining us. Just as a reminder, thank you so much for all of you all joining in Zoom, but we also have these in person as well if you want to attend our third session in person and bring a lunch and nibble while you learn. I'm Bree Jackson, Director of CETL, and I am happy to introduce David Stern, who is going to talk to us a little today about being a data person, or rather being a data person without losing yourself in the data or losing your soul. So without further ado, I turn the session over to him.
Thank you, and welcome. Karen, you didn't get one of those. We passed one more out, and for those of you joining us online, Kevin will send out a copy of what I've got here. It really is just a printout of a couple of chapters from this book by Amelia Parnell. You Are a Data Person, and this is the basis of some of the work. See, this is strange. I'm going to turn my video back on. I'm the public speaking guy, and I don't know how to do this without trying to make eye contact with my audience. So I just can't help it. This is the framework that sort of underlies the basis of the work we're doing in the Achieving the Dream group and the Dream team, and the data team that is backing up or supporting the ATD work. Why I'm giving this presentation today, or why we're having this discussion with me today, is that when I was asked by Dr. Dwyer about joining the data team on ATD, my response was like, what the hell are you thinking? I do rhetoric, critical, cultural criticism. I teach public speaking courses. I am not a data person. I fear data. And except in the one context of going to a Star Trek convention in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, more than 15 years ago. Actually, to be honest with you, I feared this data too. I became starstruck and speechless when he came at me to shake my hand, and I just my wife had to push me. But the idea here is that we're all data people, and that we all have something to contribute to the campus in terms of our own data identity. I really was very hesitant to join this team. I didn't know what I was going to be able to contribute. And eventually I was able to go to the ATD Dream Conference this past February and go to a workshop led by Dr. Parnell. And that's where I got a copy of her book, which we have in the library in hard copy. We also have full digital access to it. So by all means, I would encourage you to read the entire thing. I've brought printouts, and the PDF is two of the chapters that I think really break down. Chapter 2 sort of breaks down and defines her ideas of the identity framework. And the chapter 7 includes a self-assessment, so you can find your own data strengths. And it was chapter 7 we sort of worked through at the conference together, with Parnell sort of leading the way. And through these various data identities, or identity frameworks, I really was able to get comfortable with the work I would be doing and what I could contribute to the team. She always begins this discussion with this question: how do you use data every day to make decisions. Someone like me, I don't feel like I engage with data on a regular basis. And some of the examples that she brought up were things like, well, do you check the weather before you get dressed in the morning to see how to dress? Okay, that is a form of data I use every day. I look at traffic and sort of plan my route. So I wanted to ask if there were some ways that you use data to plan your day. What are some ways you've used data to make a decision this morning? Just a couple of volunteers, if anyone wants to offer something.
Because I travel from Williamsburg, I look at the traffic.
There we go. Here's traffic. Thank you, Karen.
Because I'm in training, I have to check weather, sunrise, sunset, and all these different things for the day to plan my exercise schedule.
I got into cooking as a hobby years ago, maybe 10 years ago now. I just found it very therapeutic. It was this great thing. So I do the cooking at home. And I caught myself this morning doing something I regularly do. I haven't made this particular dish in a while. So I'm looking at the recipe and I just want to make sure, is there anything I need to stop and get on my way home from work so that I've got all of the ingredients that I need? And it was, that's another way that I know I regularly encounter data, and I don't think of it that way. So I want to use an example, and if I'm sort of in lecture mode too much, stop me and we can talk. But I wanted to provide sort of a common example that's very much related to what we're doing in ATD, so that we can maybe discuss a common element here as we go. I want to show you the 6 data identity types and help you see how I became a convert to this idea that, yes, I'm a data person, we're all data people, and our interactions with data can even those daily interactions can help us with work we do here at the college. I confused myself. There goes the public speaking pro. So the components of the data identity framework is that we each interact with these 6 components in some way, but that we're each of us going to have strengths and weaknesses among these components. Curiosity and inquiry, that ability to ask clear questions, formulate and ask clear questions. And it'll, when we go into detail, it goes beyond asking those clear questions, but are they good questions? Are they the right questions? Are they valuable questions? The research and analysis piece. Do you know the right methodologies? Can you do the calculations? Do you know where to look for the information that we need? The communication and consultation piece, to clearly discuss findings and present them to multiple audiences. That was one I keyed in on right away. I thought, I'm pretty good at that. Campus context. What's your knowledge of current issues within the institution? What's going on inside Reynolds Community College? The strategy and planning piece. Do you have the ability to select a course of action and execute that course of action? And then finally, industry knowledge. What's going on currently inside higher education? And I personally found my 2 strengths were the communication and consultation piece and the curiosity and inquiry piece. I've gotten quite good at coming up with questions about the data and communicating those questions and reframing the answers so that they can be communicated out to various audiences. I also realized as I was working on some of the exercises that Parnell recommends, that industry context was something else that I could get better at, get stronger at. I'm a news junkie anyway. It's all NPR all the time in my car. First thing I do after I make a pot of coffee in the morning is I start reading the news. And if I just direct some of that curiosity and interest in news towards higher education, which, I'm already on how many lists of emails from the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed, just keep reading that. Focus a little more on community college, focus a little more on data-related issues in general. And I've got another strength, another piece that I can contribute. And that brings us to this headline that I caught and shared this article with the data team. It's an article from the AP. I just randomly came across it. I wasn't really even looking very closely. It's by Colin Binkley, and it's from, less than a month and a half ago. This was the end of August. And the article's about college students that are really struggling with basic math. It's getting worse. And it seems likely it has something to do with the pandemic. But I realized we're focusing on math retention. Those gateway math courses are one of the areas that ATD, that the Dream Team has decided to focus in on. And so data related to gateway math courses at the college in the state of Virginia, and this article happens to focus on some of our colleagues in Northern Virginia. They mention a couple of the community colleges and George Mason University as well. And what's going on there? Well, if gateway math scores are declining, if the DFW rate in those classes is declining or increasing, for the data people who would recognize that I need to make sure I'm moving the numbers in the right direction. If those rates are increasing and the DFW rate's increasing and we're trying to lower ours, we're pushing against a headwind now that we may not have been aware of when we set the goal. So this is where I'm seeing myself increase in industry knowledge. So we can go through each of these identity types in detail, but what I really wanted to do, and I'm a little, frankly, a little disappointed I'm not seeing more of my humanities colleagues here, is rather than necessarily digging into each of these identity frameworks, is just to have a conversation about how working within this kind of framework and these ideas of data identities can help us not only as we try to push on gateway math scores and gateway English scores, as well as completion and retention. What are some of the other ways we might think about bringing data into our work? Maybe at the program level, at the department level, at the school level. So as to make this idea of data-driven decision-making more a part of our work, our professional lives. Because frankly, the college is heading in that direction. And it felt very scary to me until I was able to say, I know how I can contribute to the data discussions. I haven't got the strengths and methodologies. I managed a B in my communication research methods class in grad school because I killed it on the qualitative and critical pieces. But yeah, I got an F on the quantitative quiz. I did. I can tell you chi-squares for comparing things. I'm still not sure what a p-value is. Alphas confuse me and terrify me. But once I have Mel Boynton there to explain the numbers, what are these numbers trying to say? I can then put that into a better context. I can verbalize that and explain that and take it to my humanities colleagues. I can ask good questions. And that's given me a lot more confidence for interacting with data. So at this point, I really just want to open the conversation up and maybe try to offer some advice or empathy to people who might be intimidated or curious about how this can move forward. One other quick thought, though, that I also want to put out there is for those of you who do see yourselves as, you're ready to embrace the idea of I'm a data person. Karen and I were talking earlier about counting things and wanting quantitative work and finding the qualitative side of research maybe a little new or intimidating or perhaps
It's killing me, David.
It's
Don't make it nice. It's killing me.
And what I'm thinking on that side of it is that by collaborating on data, right? The concept that we're not all going to be strong at all of these things, but that there are people within the institution that we can work with. So, Mel and I, it seems like we could be speaking completely different languages, but when we sit down and okay, tell me what this means, Mel, and she explains it, and I can then paraphrase, okay, here's what I think I hear you saying. And she, oh yeah, that was a better way to say it. Well, we're working together. We're helping one another make sense of the data for the benefit of the college. So the possibility of more collaboration like this and pulling on these strengths, using the framework as that, just a basic framework, not pigeonholing anybody into any roles, but that we can really contribute something beyond just the ATD work, but to faculty senate, to other forms of decision-making around the college. So where do you want to begin?
I would like to say that most of the members of my immediate and extended family do not appreciate my ability to formulate and ask clear questions.
They should appreciate that
They
much
do
more.
not. Nor do they appreciate the research and analysis when I question their methodologies.
How many copies would you like? Because there's a self-assessment in here. You can just hand it out.
Yeah.
I think that in the past, we collected a lot of data, but we never did anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some frustration related to that, but I see things changing. And it's really nice to actually make plans and implement strategies based on the data that we collect. We're headed in the right direction.
And I think, Kathy, that's exactly the right observation to make. We're moving more and more in that direction. Instead of a bunch of slides from Dr. Pando or another administrator once or twice a year, giving us a bunch of statistics and numbers, and then we go off like, oh, that's very interesting, whatever that number means. Okay, now I'm gonna go teach my class. Bye. We can have further discussion about it, and we can see what those numbers mean, where they're coming from. I am amazed at how much discussion we have had in the committee about what are we even getting the right sample, right? Are we finding the right information? Are these the students we should be looking at, or the classes we should be looking at? We had a meeting last week. The team had ATD team had a meeting on Friday, a big summit that we had, and April Prentice asked an interesting question. She's an English instructor, English professor here, and asked an interesting question about, we're looking at Gateway English, right? And increasing retention and completion rates, satisfactory completion of Gateway English, which we've defined as English 131. I hope I got that number right. It might have been 130. It's the Mel's gonna know. Mel knows everything. It's the Gateway English course for some of our career studies certificates. So the non-transfer writing course. And then English 111 and English 112 that really are the courses for transfer students. And April asked, have we looked at satisfactory completion rates in English 112 for students who take it in the next available session after they take 111? So if we're talking 7-week, do they do 7-week 1, 7-week 2, or, you know, the 15-week fall to the 15-week spring? Thanks, Mel, 137. Versus students who wait and maybe put a semester or two in between English 111 and English 112. I don't know if we've really picked that apart to see that before, but that was another humanities faculty member going into the curiosity and inquiry piece that we're trained in with rhetorical and critical research to dig in. But now there's a mechanism for speaking to Mel, rather than sending an IR ticket off to, you know, some anonymous computer somewhere. Okay, well, there's Mel. I can ask Mel, and she'll appreciate the value of the question. I can talk to Karen. I can talk to Bree. What are the implications there? Because April's going next to the idea of having English 111 and 112 required to be in a tighter sequence, and maybe build a cohort model for those classes. Well, now I'm thinking Bree can weigh in on building cohort models and pieces like that. So this is the kind of questions I'm getting to encounter with this framework.
And would that translate to Spanish 101, 102?
That could easily translate to Spanish 101 and 102.
Spanish teacher, no learning loss in between.
Yeah.
It would for the sciences as well.
Maybe that's something we need to start considering. And again, I know going back to ATD, we're looking at program maps as one of our practices that we need to get into. and rethinking not just my program's map, but institution-wide thinking about how do we do program maps, right? We had the whole guided pathways thing, and that was back to the campus context, right? Some of us I came on sort of as guided pathways was, I heard it the first year, and then I heard less of it and less of it and less of it. And it seems like it was a fad. I don't really know what brought that on, but it didn't seem like it held out, right? It didn't hold on. So let's learn from those mistakes. If we're going to reformulate program maps, let's learn from that, right? Let's bring on folks who have that campus context, who went through building guided pathways and then saw it sort of drift away. What I love about this idea of the data piece is this isn't something that needs to be a fad. We've all seen programs come and go, ideas come and go in any college or university we've worked at. But and I happen to like the ATD models that we're getting, and the structure of that organization. But I think even if that turns out to be another fad, that we drift away from making data-driven decisions, following the data, relying on each other, our strengths, to help one another make sense of the data internally. And building on that is something that really can just be a part of the college indefinitely, and maybe should be.
So one thing I think that would be interesting from my program head seat is thinking about there being standard data sets for us to work with. So the idea is that at a certain point during the year, we might get a very specific, I want to call them, I've seen them called data placemats.
Okay.
Where basically it's like a one pager that has the critical information that like all programs across the college should have an awareness of, right? And that allows us then to say, okay, just based on this little snippet of information, where do we need to go deeper as we think about program health and filling out our program assessment pieces? And so I'd be curious to hear from other program heads who might be on the call. What do you think, what would be helpful to basically have as some of that baseline data that we get provided? And then where do we then take that in terms of going deeper in the dives? Or Mel, if you have any thoughts on that too, I'd love to hear it as well. Am I the only program head?
I know my thoughts. I was a program head last semester. I am so grateful that I'm not anymore. But this is being recorded. Maybe I should have held that part back. I would have looked at a data placemat and gone, okay, more numbers, depending on how it's presented to me, right? It's not about it's not as much what data is there, but does it make any sense to me? What am I remember before I was even invited onto the ATD thing, I don't even know if we were in ATD. I think Mel was still pretty new, and I know that the dashboards were new. And I asked Mel, can we have a meeting and show me around the dashboard? I don't know if you remember this, but I do. And she's like, and you can find this data. And I'm like, okay, but Why? What am I supposed to do with this data? Like, what kind of decision am I supposed to make? What is it supposed to tell me here? You know, I see a line going up, I see a line going down. What does that mean? How do I make sense of it? And now I'm seeing that, okay, maybe I can't quite make sense of it. Maybe Mel and I in conversation can make sense of it. Better yet, we get, I know Ehab is great with the spreadsheets, right? I mean, Ehab, I was on a search
You want to
committee.
be in a search committee with Ehab.
I was on a search committee when
We were on the same one.
he fixed those rubrics, like, oh, it was great. And I started saying I will never serve on a search committee without Ehab again. What are the ways that we can bring these strengths together so that if we're gonna do a data placemat, or we're gonna look at the dashboards, that we're doing it in a way that's meaningful and makes sense. I love you too, man. Yeah, I think that's great stuff. The placemat idea I like. It could be, I could see a weekly sort of email, the data related email that
Not weekly. Not weekly.
I was
Yeah.
waiting for someone to shut down the weekly.
I could see it. It's not deep, but
So one of the things that I think is interesting as we think about data and using data is that depending on your role at the college, the time that you can spend in the data varies substantially throughout
Sure.
the year, right? I mean, we all know Lori talks about being in the dashboards every day, right?
yeah,
And then-
that's not realistic for many of us.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Or
And then-
useful.
Right, and then there are some of us that go into it on an as-need basis for finding out something specific about, say, a program head role, or maybe we do have that curiosity about our own courses, and so we might go on that dive. But I think that I agree with you that there is this sort of shifting culture at the college, but I feel like on some level, it still feels like it's running away with us, like the top has sort of taken it. I feel like
Mhm.
administration is really emphasizing the use of that, but it hasn't trickled down because the rest of us are still kind of busy in our own little warrens of our jobs.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to think of ways that we can encourage that shift in culture, but make it feel doable, right? And that idea of, I'm not gonna get flooded with information.
Mhm.
Sense will be made for me if I'm not in the space of making that sense on my own.
Right.
And that it's finding some balance there of that, my own innate curiosity versus what I sort of need to know.
And this is where these components get really helpful.
Mhm.
Because what I'm hearing is that the folks at the top may not have the campus context that they need to make decisions about how to share the data or get us using the data. That may be where we need to draw on faculty senate to provide more of what's the day-to-day like from the faculty's point of view in terms of how this impacts our use of data in decision making. That's what I like about this framework, is it provides that balance, or a framework to get to that balance at least. Do we have enough of each of these components in place and the people in place to help us make sense of the data?
And in particular, communication, because I always laugh as someone in higher ed and always working with faculty and teachers that we are told best practice is contextualize the information for your students. You never want to show a video in class or post it by just putting it up there.
Yeah.
You don't just throw a chapter at them. You tell them, this is the purpose of it. This is what I want you to think about during this exercise. You give the exercise and then you come back. This is what you should have learned, et cetera. That's what best practice tells us. But in our own positions, it's never presented to us that way. It's just, here's some numbers.
Yeah.
Here's a list. Here's raw data. And it's never really contextualized. And I think that's something that folks that share data could get better at, thinking about it as you would present it to students. And it's not saying that faculty are unable to understand the data, but it needs to be contextualized. A humanities person may not necessarily understand that chi-squared and why the heck it's being presented on a graph. And likewise, a bunch of focus group results may not make sense to a quantitative person who says, well, exactly how many people said that? Give me some numbers. Like, they don't know why it's being presented as a narrative.
And that's where this balance comes in. And I think part of the first step is making sure we have a balance. And the data team has, it's been amazing working with these folks on the data team, because we do really seem to have that balance well struck. Building off of that as a model for further use. I think that's what we need. I love the communication piece. That's the fun part for me. And the curiosity is also great. I know when I brought this article to the data team's attention, one of the questions I asked was like, where our goal is to decrease DFW or increase successful completion, which we define as a C or better. Was it 6%, Mel? Or I feel like 6% was the goal.
Like 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly.
5 or 6%. And what I'm now thinking, and I brought this to the team, is okay, if we're against this headwind, and let's say everybody's success rate, the national average is a decrease of say 15%, but ours only decreases, by 10%. Can we claim we were effective, right? We didn't actually increase our number, which was our stated goal, but we held off a headwind that we were facing. And that's a question that I loved that I could contribute, that it allowed me, this humanities person, to really feel like I'm involved in working with the data, but doing it in a way that fits, that makes sense for what I do in terms of my training, my education, and my background. And I can add something valuable. The planning, the strategy and planning piece, no, not one of my strengths. I was so happy to not be a program head anymore. And so any authority I had to make any changes, really, like, no, I'm happy to give that to somebody else who's got to go up for a multi-year contract soon. That's something I want to hand over to someone else. It's not a strength that I have particularly. So I'm glad that, say, in terms of our data team, Tim Merrill's there. He's got more authority. He can make the calls and contribute more to the planning. Like I said, Karen, you had stepped out, but I was pointing out that the campus context might be something in a bigger sense that faculty senate might take up better. We're talking about how there's sometimes disconnect between the executive cabinet and the faculty. And that's an element of campus context. Something gets pushed out from above without necessarily being aware of where faculty are, just even in the cycle of a semester. asking faculty to do something on the last day of classes is generally going to be a bad idea, but somebody's got to get that information to them. That's part of the context that might be missing.
Or no offense to the IT people that upgrade things the weekend before grades are due or something like that.
I scratch my head about that one frequently.
Yeah.
And to be fair, the institution I was at before I got to Reynolds did that too.
Yeah.
It seems to be that the software companies push the updates right at the worst possible time. But absolutely, we could, that's part of that context.
Mhm.
And maybe we need to, it feels very frustrating. It makes me phenomenally angry sometimes. But maybe we need to go to the research and analysis folks to tell us, how often does this actually happen? Is it just one of those things that it feels like it always happens because it's so frustrating? Or is it something that really needs to be addressed? When I'm cooking, I cut myself from time to time. And every time it happens, Colleen goes, again? Really? Bleeding all over again? I'm like, it's been 3 weeks since the last time I nearly severed a finger off. Come on, give me a break.
This is your hobby, right? The one that.
The hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to joke when I get a new knife, it's not really mine until it's caused me to bleed.
Tell her to buy you one of those gloves that you can wear on your non-dominant
Yes.
hand.
I had a pair of those and they lasted a couple of weeks. I couldn't figure out. So I cut onions with them and then I cleaned them and they still stank. So Colleen insisted I put them in a Ziploc bag
Oh, which is
and then they got
worse.
moldy.
I was gonna
Oh.
say.
So that was the short-lived adventure with safety gloves.
You need the Chipotle chainmail ones.
Yeah. I found the trick actually is a wider knife. It makes it easier to cut. I use a Chinese cleaver now. It's scary looking. It's great. I look so terrifying with this cleaver in my hand, but it's actually safer.
Comment, folks. I'm one of Mel's minions, by the way. Your top left thing about curiosity and inquiry. One of the really critical things when we get a request, and this is when you were, say, going to dive into the PDP, is actually figuring out what your question is. What do you want to know? Start with there and then try to figure out how to get there.
I think, and thank you for bringing that up, Nat, because Mel and I have talked about this occasionally. Getting into those questions, rather than sending me an IR request, Mel would say this, but rather than sending the IR request, send me this data, give her a phone call first. Talk about what information you want. What is it what is it you want? What kind of decision are you trying to make? What is this data going to be informing? And then figuring out, okay, what is the data that needs to be pulled to get there? And you guys, Nat, Mel, you guys have been great at that when the question is communicated correctly and clearly. And that may be something we need help with. Maybe the data placemat, I could see, a section of that as some guidelines, right? Questions to ask before you pull the data.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. Like I've learned long ago, like as much as possible to just try to talk first with the person who's making the request, because some of them are super straightforward and there's no need to have a discussion, but a lot of them, and David knows because he's been through this with me, when I'm like, well, what are you trying to do with that information? And it seems like I'm like, I do want it, but that's not the point. Like, it's like, I'm trying to understand what will be the most valuable to you. And there's many times where we'll listen to someone and we'll say, oh, but what if we add this column? Or what if we add this additional information? Or how about like this? And they go, oh, yeah, that would be so much better than what I was thinking. And so it's that interaction piece. I really have to applaud David and Ramsey and the faculty who've been in the data team, as well as the general implementation and dream team on the Achieving the Dream group as an example. They've been so good about telling us what they think the data is showing and more questions they have. Because I got to tell you, there are so many times when they ask a question, I'm like, that's a really good question. I never thought about that. We need to add another filter, or we need to add this. There's so much the campus context is really provided largely by the faculty, to be honest. And then I think our team brings a lot of the research analysis and the curiosity piece to the party. We're a strength there because we can kind of look at the context that you guys have about how things work, because we don't know, to be honest. And you bring that in, and then that helps us build better tools. So I just want to applaud you guys for participating. I see a lot of people on the call and people in the room who have either worked with us on data requests, been excellent testers. I have to give a shout out to Janet Adams. She's one of the best and most thorough testers I've ever seen. And really what she brought was not only an attention to detail, but campus context. Okay, that chart's not that helpful. That doesn't really tell me a whole lot. Or do it this way. Or what if you add this? Or I really need to understand this. And that has been the partnership that, without that being really strong and something we're constantly working at, anything that our team produces is going to be, it's not going to have the shine. It's not going to have the value. All the buttons. Okay, I'll stop talking. That's my little speech.
No, it's great. And Mel and your team, you guys have been great to work with. And I think that's another piece I want to get across with this lunch and learn. Yes, we're moving in the direction as an institution towards more data-informed decision-making. But we don't need to be afraid of that or of the data. Mel and her team have been great. Mel is very patient. She teaches me new things all the time whenever I'm asking questions. We were talking early on, Mel will remember this. We were talking about another one of these goals. We're trying to figure out what's the best measure of credit completion to look at. Do you remember this discussion? How many credits do we want to, what's the best indicator for us that our students are completing enough credits that they're going to see their degree or certificate all the way through? And you start thinking, okay, the lower the number of credits, the earlier we're getting them, the less likely they are to quit before they get to that number. But then I asked that question about, okay, if we're going to start tweaking Gateway Math and we're going to start tweaking Gateway English, and those are the same two classes that students are most likely to take in their first, say, 9 credits or 12 credits, how do we know which change, in ATD speak, they talk about pulling levers, right? Which lever are we pulling that's causing the change? Is it the way we're looking at the program maps and credit completion, or is it the changes to math and English? So is 9 credits or 12 credits enough? And Mel's going to hate me for forgetting what that was called, but she taught me what that was called when you can't tell what the data is. I have it in my notes somewhere, Mel, I promise. but when you're not looking at the you're confusing where your data is getting the various variables that are affecting the data. But it was one of those great conversations, and just knowing there's a word for something that I'm thinking always helps me to feel better about it. Gives me more confidence in the data I'm interacting. What are some other questions? Thoughts?
Or even concerns, like anything that we can, that'll help us build a bridge, things that are sort of on your mind that are like, oh, what about this? Anything where we know there's a concern, we can usually help, we can improve the way we mitigate the concern.
Well, I know we're just about out of time. We're close. We've got, I think, 8 minutes or so. I'm more than happy to wrap this early if that's what if that's what we want, or go through just quickly a little more detail on these various points. The framework, these different identity strength or data identity strengths in the framework that Parnell offers, and it's in the handout that I've given out to the folks in the room, that Kevin's going to send out to all of you who participated online. But what these are, or we can wrap early. I think that there's not much more I could add here. I hope I was able to spark some good discussion and curiosity, and I hope that this is the first of an ongoing series of discussions about the role of data on our campus.
I want to issue a challenge. So I want us, as many of us as possible, go through the chapter 7 of the Parnell book and figure out your data frame. And then we can, like, when we see each other next, we can be like, what frame are you?
Oh, are you gonna have us like putting our data identity into our email signatures?
That's right.
Is that what you're picturing?
That's
So
right. That's right.
That's
Well,
great.
I think it's just interesting to know that, because it's like there's some people that it's very clear that, oh, you understand my language. But if I know that you come at it from a different frame, I think it becomes that much more valuable then to think about, okay, what other aspects of that conversation do we need to have?
and what's so great in this chapter 7, which is the self-assessment, is she says we each have aspects of this. We're all here in higher education. We've all got some degree of research and analysis and some degree of campus context and so on, but we can frame them in terms of an emerging ability, a developing ability, or a strong ability. So I sat down and did the assessment, and the curiosity and inquiry, communication and consultation pieces popped right up as strong ability. I honestly thought strategy and planning might be. I do tend to be kind of a strategic thinker, but once that piece of authority came into it, even when I had some authority as a program head, I didn't really have the confidence in my strategy and planning to use it as much. And so I found that's more of a developing ability. Campus context, I'm honestly an introvert. I like to keep myself to myself. And I'm not sure that campus context is one I'm even going to try to bulk up. I've got some of it, but it might push me too far out of my comfort zone. But I can count on, Kevin. I mean, you interact with everybody. you've got more campus context than probably most of us in the room, maybe, you know, Karen. But I can go to others for that, and we can really build off of one another and work together instead of seeing it as a weakness. It's just something we can work together on. It's not something to be afraid of. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful. My main goal was to just demystify it a little and make the whole data decision-making more approachable for all of us. Great. I hope you all have a great lunch.
David, it was good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You bet.
And everybody, please look up for a follow-up email from CEDL coming to your inbox soon. Thank you for coming.